Hi there. You are listening to the Perio Patient Podcast, a podcast for my patients and anyone else who cares to listen. My name is Dr. Ben Young, and I am a periodontist in private practice in San Antonio, Texas. This is podcast number 63, and I have entitled this one Practice Principle Number 3, Be Skeptical. Welcome if this is your first time listening. Otherwise, welcome back. Here's the deal. I teach and practice a philosophy of care intended to partner with patients, not direct and control them. I want people to think for themselves, which brings me to my practice principle number 3. But for a second, let's go back and think about the last two. The first practice principle was communication, talk clearly, be honest, speak plainly. The second one was be respectful, respect everyone, do it as a discipline, and that way you can work with more people. And now we're here on number 3, be skeptical. That's right, think for yourself. If you disagree with me and others, fine. It sounds strange that I would say this to you, I know. And that's because there is an initial desire to be agreed with. We all want it. How much easier would it be if you just did what I told you? It's an enticing thought. It's a lot of what people think they're going to get when they become quote-unquote doctors. People will respect them and do what they are told. It doesn't quite work that way, fortunately. But again, it's an enticing thought because my day would flow so much smoother. Everyone would fall in line and do what I say. It is the highest form of human power, I think, to speak and have others move, jump without argument, without discussions. But here's the problem. All minds are turned off except one. And if that mind is my own, then it better be right about everything. And that's a problem. When I am the one directing the lives of others, I am a dictator. And if you look at history, if you really want to see horrible societies, places you would not want to live, then look at dictatorships. Everyone lives in fear. And I would say even the dictator, waiting for somebody to jump him. Stupid things are done and justified because no one wants to get out of line. No one wants to be blamed. So everyone follows the quote-unquote party line. Here's the alternative, however. I respect you and your brain. I may know things you don't know, but that doesn't mean that your thinking ability is weak, limited, or impaired. We just know different things and have probably lived different lives. So we can relate in some ways and not in others. But that's why you need clear communication and respect. But for you to be healthy and live a good life, you have to do more than just follow my orders or the orders of others. You have to take on responsibility for making your own decisions. What begins as a challenge, requiring me to do the best I can to communicate and the best I can to respect, also requires me to encourage you to think skeptically. Do not just accept my word or the words of others. Do your best to not only understand, but to question. Now, here is why this is good for me. It means that I have a patient who is engaged, who is willing to do his or her part to cooperate, once, of course, they buy in. And if they do not buy in, then I have the pushback I need to improve my communication skills, perhaps, or look at challenges that may help me to correct when I'm wrong. Also, it gives me practice in respecting when people have questions even those I may have answered 100 times before, because I realize it is on their minds, probably for the first time. If I were in their shoes, I would be asking similar, if not the exact same questions. My guess is that probably about 80% of what I do today was not learned in dental school because it was either scientifically not yet known or the technology did not exist. If I was not constantly studying and reviewing things skeptically after graduating from formal education, I would not be providing up-to-date care today. This is simply the nature of the exponential growth of science and technology in our current age. But of course, just because something is new doesn't mean it is better or even any good. So I have to continually watch and see what makes enough sense to change my protocols. And I want others to be skeptical too, even if it means skeptical of me, because we each have to operate with a sense of ownership. And it is the open discussions thankfully provided us by that First Amendment right of freedom of speech that enables us to push each other toward better care going forward. And this is why free societies work better than dictatorships. As a patient, you need to think, this is my body and I will ultimately decide what is best for me. The worst cop-out statement I periodically hear is, well, you're the doctor. This is actually code for, this had better work, because if it doesn't, I'm holding you completely responsible. And here's a close second cop-out. And you might think this, but I doubt it. But it sets people up for really poor dental care. And it is, I want whatever my insurance allows. People in this category will probably get a vaccine primarily because it's free. I know these people exist because periodically our paths cross, but generally not for very long because we don't mesh philosophically. And usually they don't listen to podcasts like this one. But wait, I hear a very legitimate question that at least one of you listening to me is thinking, and it's this. But what if I don't have a lot of money and I need to rely a lot on my dental insurance? That's a great question. And that's the one you want to ask in person. What you might say could be something like this. Right now, I really need to utilize my dental insurance because I don't have a lot of money available. How can you help me achieve a healthy mouth under these circumstances? Great question. My overarching answer to that question will likely include something like this. Emergency care is the most expensive care you will need to address because it likely involves pain and infection risks to your health. And it's because it's so inconvenient, it's just more expensive. It's forcing your hand, so that we don't want. After this care, the next is likely the most important but least expensive, if you look at it correctly. This is preventive care and involves examinations on a regular basis and cleanings to keep things from getting worse. Fortunately, most of this care is covered by dental insurance, except, and this is a big one, what you need may not be what they cover. In other words, you may need more cleanings and examinations in a year than they will cover. Do whatever it is that will keep you from falling backwards. But again, I still think the good news is that this is the least expensive care possible. If you have a good preventive plan in place, you can schedule much of your restorative care over time. The problem with most people is they will try to pay for expensive treatment at the expense of the preventive care, which is like putting up one wall of a house while another wall catches fire. But this is why it is critical that you think and deal with these problems straight up. This includes pushing back at your insurance when it, for any reason, stops providing you what it appears to have promised. Go back and listen to some of my earlier podcasts on this subject. I preach that 80% of your care is what you do for yourself, and 20% is what I and other health providers can do for you. But rest assured that I own my 20% because I want to provide the highest quality care I can, which, as this practice principle describes, must be constantly evaluated with a healthy level of skepticism. Is what I'm doing right? Can I improve it? Are there other ways to do this? What about other therapy? I need to be reading. I need to be asking questions and engaging in conversations with others. In this way, what I provide will constantly be tweaked or periodically radically altered if this is what is necessary to stay as close to the front line of my specialty as I possibly can. And just as a side note on that, I use an ND YAG laser, but I'm looking at erbiums. So there are other possible potential therapies I could be using, but the jury's not out yet. I'm not convinced just yet. As part of this podcast, I went back to listen to a few earlier ones to review what it is I have covered so far with you. Frankly, I think it is time we talked at an even deeper level. And again, my focus is to talk from things we have in common, especially around your needs as a dental patient and possibly as a periodontal patient. But it isn't hard to branch out and talk about medical issues as well as social and economic ones as much as they relate. Perhaps they only relate at this time due to historical events we as a nation or world appear to be passing through. And I will frankly talk about anything as I can relate it to my area or areas of expertise. Now, the easiest thing in the world, because I am a health professional, is to support the general message and encourage you to get the vaccine. But so far, I'm not personally convinced and have not taken the vaccine myself. This is practicing the skepticism I have just been preaching. And to be clear, it isn't because I don't believe in vaccines or even new discoveries and inventions in the world of vaccines. I think some of our greatest blessings have come from the discovery and applications of vaccines. What I have a problem with, and am in protest over, frankly, is the way this vaccine or vaccines are being pitched to the public. I am protesting against authoritarian medicine, against mandated lockups, mandated masks, mandating the healthy to give up employment or going to school rather than quarantining the infected and isolating within reason those who are at greatest risk. We care for the fragile, the frail. We don't do this to the healthy. I protest a system that has one answer, which changes for the convenience of leaders, but not society. We started with working to flatten the spread, flatten the curve, to protect our medical system. And if you go back and listen to some of my early YouTube entries in that area, that's exactly what I understood it to be, and was thinking this is a very rational approach to an attack by a virus that we didn't know much about. Then we got into the need for respirators because people were not directed well as to what to do until they couldn't breathe and ended up at the local emergency room At that point, overwhelming the medical system was a real, and I would say legitimate, concern. This particular virus was a little different from the flu, but not by much. The world death rate has not increased because of it over what is usually expected. Flu as cause of death, which is always present in the elderly, disappeared. And we all know early on, COVID was diagnosed by symptoms that were imprecise. We didn't have to have positive testing. We just had to have a few symptoms. Cold-like, flu-like symptoms. In early summer, scientists and medical providers started talking about earlier outpatient treatments that were working and enabling people to recover without needing hospitalization. But this seemed to work against the narrative having more to do with politics than with a good practice of medicine. I even mentioned this on this podcast at the time. We together learned about hydroxychloroquine and later ivermectin, two safe and inexpensive medications around for decades. But we're told they didn't work, it should not be used. Also, vitamin D and zinc were found to be important and explained by a few outside of government-run public health departments. In fact, as reports came out, but because they did not comply with World Health Organization recommendations, the same group that has downplayed the role of the Communist Chinese Party in this pandemic, social media oligarchs began censoring real medical experts. Again, I'm not knocking vaccinations, but the hand is now being overplayed to the point where certain authoritarian leaders are telling we the people to just accept a new lockdown normal. I'm glad we have vaccines, but I question why those who have had this particular virus, been infected by it, don't find that it provides more than enough immunity not to now require a vaccine. If you have the chickenpox, for example, I don't believe you need the chickenpox vaccine. Why is this one different? Well, that's a good question. Will the vaccines work? Probably, possibly. Does everyone need one? Well, go back to the risks. Who is at risk of dying? Not just getting sick, but expiring. We all have had the flu. It can be awful, but our chances of dying are extremely low, unless, of course, our immune system is weakened by age or other significant medical problems. And one of my concerns when it comes to the immune system is tinkering with it. Injecting in messenger RNA when we have reverse transcriptase abilities within the cells to do things with that RNA that we don't even know about on a vaccine that's experimental. I just don't understand it, frankly. Finally, with regards to vaccines, I'm not comfortable with the fact this is experimental, as I've said, and this means you, whether you know it or not, are enrolled in a study, and I'm part of the control group, which means things have been bypassed to get this vaccine out if they're having to do it as a study. Also, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that Dr. Fauci and others hold patents for aspects of this virus, meaning there's a relationship with government and pharmaceuticals that seems unethical to me. Now, up until quite recently, I've tried to give people who do not think like me the benefit of the doubt, part of respect. If I still over time cannot make sense out of what they're saying, I would still give them the benefit of the doubt by thinking or saying things like they're just not thinking clearly, or they're not particularly bright. Recently, however, I've changed my opinion about a lot of what does not make sense to me, like the need for anyone to apologize for his skin color or gender or religious affiliations, or the need to do away with cows because they emit CO2, or that CO2 is bad, or that carbon-based fuels are bad, or we will have less crime if we do away with the citizens' right to bear arms, or we need to defund the police. You know the rest. I no longer believe those who propose such things are not thinking clearly or are not bright. I think they are both. But that they are executing a plan they don't want me to understand, at least not right away. For example, we should do away with fossil fuel. But what about jet fuel? Or what about the fact that batteries are expensive to make and require fossil fuel? What I think we are missing here is that they not only want to do away with our use of fossil fuel, they want to do away with most of us. This is a depopulation plan. It is to go back to smaller numbers of more deserving people than the masses, the deplorables. This is the plan of a mostly quiet elite class. Now, all of a sudden, the Green New Deal begins to make a lot more sense. Why not replace people with artificial intelligence, with machines? Do we really need so many workers? What if we automate? Is this a conspiracy? No, I don't think so. That sort of shift in my own thinking, I have to describe as an awakening. I have come to realize something I thought wasn't true, and because it is something big, it has required me to dig deeper and then deeper still, and be skeptical of myself as well as everyone else, and to question everything as I look from a different angle. Now, depending on where you are in life and how you've grown up to this point, I have no doubt that you will see things differently than I do. You might be further down the road that I will eventually take myself, coming to where you are now, or you might be coming to conclusions I will not personally ever come to. But humor me for just a moment and think about communication, respect, and skepticism, and apply them to what we are experiencing within our societies all over the world right now. Communication. I say be clear and be honest. It can seem like a minority opinion, but I don't think it is. It's just that the people who want to not tell the truth, to kind of couch things and make things sound logical that have no sense whatsoever, happen to have the loudest ability to vocalize, the loudest voices, the access to print media, everything. So identify them. Who are they? What are they saying? Can we tell why they might be saying these things? And an even more difficult task, what are they not saying? And what are they censoring, keeping us from saying? Which brings me to the term cancel culture. Who is in the cancel culture? Why are they there? What I will no longer do is write all of this off as people with good intentions, wanting the best for others, but a little misguided. No, they are practicing evil or enabling it through their silence to create fear in others to keep them from speaking out. Their message is essentially, if you say anything we don't like, you will be punished through our ability in social media. We will use the society around you, the one you're living in, to shame you, and we'll do it forever. Now that isn't what will happen, but that is their threat. Now, remember, I told you that I'm not trying to grow an audience, and this is still true. In fact, I think it is a rather clever tactic I recommend you do as well. Don't grow a fan base. Grow a friend base. Drop the social media avenues as much as possible and go back to talking with others face to face. Talk with one another in close circles of friends and acquaintances and share information, preferably your own information, things you're discovering and want to talk about. Reopen conversations, sort of in the way I'm talking with you now. In this way, there is the possibility people will begin to speak, think, and listen safely and learn to trust one another locally. Quietly, under the radar, more or less, the silent majority will wake up and begin to pay attention. Then, when we begin to speak, we can speak together against cancel culture and against those seeking to do us, our children, grandchildren, and generations after that irreparable harm by removing the power behind the documents that are the basis of our liberty and legal God-given rights. I'm talking to Americans, but I would say if you're in another country, look at your founding documents. The biggest risk I believe you and I face right now is to be silent and just watch things we oppose simply grow unchallenged. And I'm not talking about everyone or even anyone going to the streets and protesting outwardly. I'm not sure that really works particularly well in small groups. I'm talking about calling and talking with friends and loved ones and purposefully reconnecting as a quiet lockdown protest. To the best of our abilities, we quietly tell those we care about what we think, which is the greatest risk, it seems, because they can poo-poo us. And I'm not saying debate. I'm not saying argue, yell, even try to convince, as if it all depends on you or me as individuals. I'm saying speak your opinion and then stand your ground. If you've been a parent, you know what this is like. Your child wants X and you say that's not good for you, no. And then they have a fit. You just smile at them and say, when you're an adult, you can make your own decisions. Right now, the answer is no. You don't have to yell. You don't have to do anything but stand your ground. Allow others the time and space to process and to come to their own conclusions, and respect their conclusions. Provide evidence if asked, and if not asked, be quiet. But don't change your opinion just to get along. Stand and resist, and if necessary, know when to walk away. Now, more on respect. Even those I do not agree with, even those I might recognize as not having my best interest at heart, aka my enemies, I need to respect. It might seem like it is best to dismiss those who disagree or even hate us, but I believe this is unwise. Instead, respect that they have a plan, they have an agenda, and they don't want you to know what it is. Don't write them off. At the same time, don't write off the fact that the silent majority is overall good and peaceful and seek to continually connect to that side. Find those people to be with. Does this mean there is a conspiracy just because I don't understand completely what is going on or what others are thinking? No, I do not believe there is an overarching conspiracy, but there doesn't have to be. This is because I do believe in alliances, that people find ways to climb ladders of wealth and power by cooperating. And some do this in good, healthy ways, and others in essentially sinister and dark ways. And we can't overlook this. A conspiracy theory is just a theory. It might be true and it might be false. More probable, it might contain nuggets of truth and areas of pure conjecture and fabrication. That's how we and everyone come up with narratives, those stories we tell ourselves or are told to us about how the world works. That's why we need to be skeptical. And none of this stopped, these storytelling processes. They didn't stop when we were children. Also, it's important to recognize that labeling dissenters as conspiracy kooks is a tactic. If you or I are labeled as a conspiracy kook, it's a tactic. When people don't have good arguments, they often simply try to smear the person arguing them. It's called an AdHominem attack, attacking the man, the character of the person, attacking the messenger, not the message, not debating ideas, tearing down people. That's AdHominem. It can work for a while until enough evidence begins to mount that things are no longer explainable by what we once believed or have been told to be true. Now, when this happens, it doesn't necessarily prove a conspiracy. But on the other hand, I suggest we give up the idea that everything is just a coincidence and unrelated. Which brings me to another tactic I am discovering, and that is this invisible separation between expertise and common sense. It limits people to thinking about or commenting to others about what they are thinking because they aren't experts. It's like saying you aren't allowed to talk or think about anything unless you've talked and thought a lot about it before somewhere and were acknowledged as really knowing a lot about it. It's silly. What this does is permits a few to run things without opposition, because after all, they are the experts. The problem is that many experts have agendas, and I, for one, believe that the average intelligence of people is quite remarkable. And the third practice principle, once again, is skepticism. Be skeptical, look deeper, study more, and at the same time, don't give up. Don't get down, don't be discouraged and think it is all over and life will be dictated by others. It isn't over, but it won't be easy. Keep coming back, and if you want to connect with questions and comments, you can find me on my website, dryoungperiodontics.com. You can find me on Facebook or Telegram. I'm Ben Young DDS. That's my Twitter handle as well. Although I don't do a lot with Twitter, just to be honest. I'm happy to link you in with some of my friends if you get in touch with me on Telegram, and we can share some interesting things. Also, in the future, I will go deeper into my own personal optimism in all of this. There's a lot to talk about. You have been listening to the Perio Patient Podcast, and I am still Dr. Ben Young. Thanks for listening. Don't be a stranger, and let's talk soon. Bye for now. Did you know there's a magical breed of dog? It's called the Labracadabra Retriever.